to go ahead and clean all of the findings. First step, you'll need to have some toothpicks and some Q-tips and a little bit of rubbing alcohol, as well as a wet wipe. So go ahead and open up the rubbing alcohol. Drop down in there your Q-tip. And then you're just going to want to smear it around these outside edges, along on the inside edge, and then on the back side. On the outside. And then with your wet wipe, just go ahead and wipe down all the surfaces. This will provide your bezel to be nice and clean and ready for the resin. And these little bales, you want to get in on this back side area, back inside here. Apply a little bit of your rubbing alcohol onto that back side edge. And mostly wanting to make sure that you just get all of that blackening off. So go ahead and clean up your bales and your bezels for this class. There's multiple ways to dry organics and preserve them so that you can use them in resin. One way is by pressing them. You can press these in a press, or you can use a book or a catalog to make them nice and flat. You can place them in some silicone gel, which will allow them to stay three-dimensional and will preserve the color. Or you can let them air dry and they'll make nice little pods like that. So let's go over the 3 different ways in which you can preserve organics. The first way to preserve organics is by pressing them in a book. And why that is nice is you can use them on a flat tag because they're very, very flat. You can use them to stack up and embed within a piece to create depth. You can also put down a layer of colorized resin on the base of that and then put your organic over that once the colorized resin has cured. To go ahead and preserve organics for using with resin using a book, what you'll want to do is take your nice fresh picked organics that you might have gotten out of your garden, and you'll want to have either a thick book or you can have a catalog. I would highly recommend that you have your book. Shh, it's a library book, I'm just showing it as an example. You place your organics inside of your paper. So if you wanted it to be flat like this, you would need to remove the stem. If you wanted it to be pressed like this, you'll keep the stem on. And let's say we have our flower and we have our leaf. We'll place those inside of a piece of paper that I folded over, and then we will insert it inside of our book and press it flat. And then you can stack up other books on top of that, and then you can let that dry. It takes various times for different organics, so you'll just have to check back and make sure that it is dry to the level that you want it to. The next way to dry organics and preserve them for resin is by using a silicone gel. So in this, I liked the dimensions of this piece and many of the pieces that I'm using in my resin. Pieces like this where you can really see the dimensions of the piece, or like small mushrooms that are great for embedding into resin. And on this one, the organics are more dimensional and also layered with inside of the resin. To do this technique, what you'll need to have is some silicone gel. It comes in a huge box with instructions. I am showing you what mine looks like because it's fully loaded. I store it in a little Tupperware container, and as you can see, my organics are all inside of here. I have to go through and pull these all out and sort them. But you would have your organics, you would place them inside of like a little hold area. Usually what I'm doing is I have multiple layers inside of my silicone gel, and I'll place my organics down inside of that little hole and then sprinkle the gel over the top of it and just build layer on top of layer, as you're seeing here. So these are all organics that over all the different seasons, I'm going through my garden and pulling out whatever looks interesting, and then I'm burying it into this silicone gel, and then I will come back through and sift through and clean up all of my organics and put them in different tubs based off of the different styles of organics that they have. So inside of here, I must admit, this has been in here for a long time, but you can see there's all kinds of different treasure troves of different types of organics within inside of here that I have preserved. Here's another one showing a couple little flowers, and I especially like these little bud-like things here. So this allows you to completely dry the organics and have the three-dimensional look. The silicone gel, you can use it over and over again. On the instructions that you'll get in the box, it says the different times that it takes for the organics to dry, and so you can just go ahead and I just place this under my bedroom dresser, and it's been in there for a couple of seasons, so that's the second way in which you can use organics. The third one is, these are some seed pods. They're so dimensional. I just went ahead, they already were this color, and I just went ahead and put these on my window seal, and they dry naturally, and I can use these now into resin. One of the things to take into consideration is when you place your organics into resin, as you can see, sometimes they'll start to darken, and it's hard to predict exactly how the resin is going to affect the organics. So another thing you might want to take into consideration is doing some sort of resin spray. And how you would do that is you would place your organics that you just picked, or even ones that you have dried. I place these outside in a small box, shake this up, and then spray both sides thoroughly, and it just gives them an extra coating, and that also helps that the resin doesn't absorb into the organics and discolor them in any way. So those are the three ways that you can use organics and resin. You can use them by pressing them in a book. You can use them and preserve them by using a silicone gel, or you can go ahead and let them dry organically on your windowsill in the sun and with time. And you might be interested in getting some resin spray so that you can spray your organics, and that also prevents them from discoloring when the resin applies. Once your bezels have been cleaned, you'll want to make sure that they're flat. And if they're not flat and the tape isn't evenly dispersed on there, it'll be more of a challenge to mix and pour your resin into there. So if they're not completely flat, you can put them on the surface of the table and kind of press down, or take them over to the side of a table and kind of bend them slightly until they're pretty flat. Then in order to pour the resin into here, we're going to want to put a piece of tape on the back so that the resin will have a place to sit. To do that, you'll want to have some tape. I'm using a U-line. This is a very thick packing tape that I tend to like. Many tapes will work. You just want to make sure that it doesn't have any kind of texture to the back of it. So I don't know if you can see, and I'll try my best to show you, not all tape is equal. So you often will get little marbling in the tape, and if you have any kind of marbling in the tape, it's actually in the adhesive on there, that will show up in the resin when you pull it off the back. So pull a piece of tape off of your roll, cutting with a pair of scissors, Lay that tape down onto the base of your work area, and then you're going to press your bezel right in there. And I'm making sure that my fingers aren't getting on to the tape in that area, because that too will show up. So once you have that in position, you move it back and forth on your work surface to make sure that it's fully burnished onto the tape. And then to prevent from getting any of this all over my hands or having this risk getting caught on things, I'll trim away this excess tape. So I like to put just one piece per piece of tape, and then I like to place each one individually onto a business card so that I can easily move this around without touching or disturbing that tape that's on there. Stuck on my hands, I'm going to use a toothpick to get that off. And now I'm ready to go ahead and do the others as well. Now we're ready to mix the Nunn Design resin and pour that in with a little bit of colorants and some organics. To mix the resin, you have to have a 1-to-1 ratio exactly of 1 tablespoon to 1 tablespoon. And you have to mix the full cup in order for the resin to be properly activated. So you want to fill up to the first 1 tablespoon, always with the part A, and then up to the 2nd tablespoon, always with the part B. So I like to get down right next to my resin, so put it down on your work surface, covered area, and you're going to pour in the part A. Go ahead and take the lid off. Then get right down next to the resin so you can see that line and know exactly when you've hit it. So I'm pouring, and my bottle is tilted quite a bit up so that I can have a heavy flow because I'm putting a lot of resin in. And then as it starts to get close to that line, I'm putting the base of the bottle down closer to the table, and I'm waiting till I get right to that line. So I'll have a very thin flow, and as I hit that mark right where it's at, I'll go ahead and twist the top, and I'll use one of my wet wipes to wipe away any resin that might have spilled. And so I have a nice clean top. And put my resin top back on. Go ahead and turn that corner over where that resin was, and you're ready to pour the part B. So we're going to do this one up to that 2 tablespoon mark of the part B. So bring it right down to the surface. Pour, pour, pour. It's right to that line. And as it starts to get to that line, I'm twisting my top, ending the flow, and I'm right at that 2 tablespoon mark. Go ahead and wipe away the excess resin that might be on there. Put the lid on. Now we're ready to time ourselves for 2 minutes. So I have my timer set for 2 minutes, and I'll go ahead and start. And with one of the stir sticks, I'm holding at the base of the resin. I'm putting the stir stick into the resin, and this is a really full cup. So I'm just going slow, and you'll start by rotating around the outside edges. You can see that the two parts get cloudy right away as they start to activate and come together. So I'm going around the outside edges. I'm also scraping the bottom of the cup. And then every now and then I'm going to stop, pause, scrape the sides off to get all of that resin of part A and B back into the cup, and then come back in, stirring. You can also rotate it around with your fingers, holding it at the base. Stop and scrape the sides. Scrape the stick back into the cup and keep going. So it's a minimum of 2 minutes, but what you're really watching out for is as these two parts, A and B, become more and more mixed, they will get less cloudy. Don't worry too much about those bubbles inside of there, because those we'll have ways to deal with. So scraping the sides and the bottom. Scraping into the cup. And there's my timer. After your timer goes off, and if you still don't have a nice clear mixture, just continue to stir, rotating the cup, stirring, scraping the sides. And then as it starts to get very clear, go ahead and scrape off the top, on the top part, mixing stick. And then I like to place mine into either a cup or onto another piece of plastic and let that dry, because I can reuse that stick over and over again. And as the resin sits, it'll start to have the air bubbles come to the surface, and they'll expand and pop. You can also place this under a nice lamp, and the heat of the lamp will also make the bubbles pop. After your timer goes off, and if you still don't have a nice clear mixture, just continue to stir, rotating the cup, stirring, scraping the sides. And then as it starts to get very clear, go ahead and scrape off the top, on the top part, mixing stick. And then I like to place mine into either a cup or onto another piece of plastic and let that dry, because I can reuse that stick over and over again. And as the resin sits, it'll start to have the air bubbles come to the surface, and they'll expand and pop. You can also place this under a nice lamp, and the heat of the lamp will also make the bubbles pop. Once we've mixed our resin, we're ready to colorize it by adding 1 teaspoon up to the 1 teaspoon mark on the cup of the clear resin, and then we're going to add some white in here to get the nice color from mixing with our organics. So I'm getting right down to the eye level so that I can see exactly when I hit that 1 teaspoon mark, right up to that line. It's fine if you mix more. And then with my casting craft pigments, I know that I can put at least 10% of this into this in order and have this still cured, but I don't want to put more than 10% of my colorant into here. So it's just going to take a nice good squirt, a couple large toothpicks worth in the formula to get a nice opaque white. So just add some of your colorant in, and with your stir stick, go ahead and mix the resin up. Now we're ready to add this to our bezel. Now that we have our clear resin, our colorized resin, and we have our hoop with the tape on the back, I want to talk a little bit about thinking about the organics that are going to go into the bezel. One of the things that you're going to want to do first is kind of just get an idea of the composition of what that's going to look like and trim away any excess of your florals or your dried organics before you put them inside of the resin. I am going to guesstimate that I'm going to just go ahead and trim away some of that excess, so I just have a nice stem down here at the bottom. And then I have an organic that's going to look pretty good inside there. Plus I have all kinds of extra organics that I can embed if I want to have a different composition than what I have with just that piece. So this organic is actually attaching to my tape, so I'm going to move him over. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by drizzling some of the white inside of the bezel. I'm going to use the same, you can use a drizzle stick or you can use the mixing stick that you use to mix this together and colorize it. Drizzle some right into the base of your bezel. Your open hoop here. And I'm putting some right into the middle of that. And then I'm going to go in with a toothpick, and I'm actually going to use two. I'm going to hold my toothpick, hold it on the tape. And my first objective is to come around to these edges right here, because this is where bubbles tend to form. On the back side of the piece is right along the edges of where this connects. So I'm moving the resin around and getting right to that edge and agitating it to make sure that I don't have any air that's lodged into those areas. So the base of the piece that I'm working on is white, but you can use any color that you can imagine once you know how to mix the Nunn Design resin and the Casting Craft opaque colorants. You can make any color that you want. So we're starting out with the base of white, and then I'm going to drizzle a little bit of the clear onto my work surface, and I'm going to place my organics into this and pre-coat it before I put it into the white. So I used my toothpick that was covered with resin to pick up my organics on the side there, place it into the clear resin, add a little bit more. So when I'm picking up this resin with this toothpick, I'm dipping it in and twisting it, and it ends that flow so I don't have a lot of strings of resin flowing all over the side of my cup and onto my work surface. I'm going to also drizzle a little bit of this clear into the base of this to kind of give this a base of where this organics is going to rest. That'll help prevent it from getting drowned out by the white. Now I'm ready to transfer this in. You can do this by lifting it up with your toothpick and just laying it down. Now you can go ahead and continue to add a little bit more of the clear resin onto this and just blend or place this clear resin over the top of the organics. Got a little bit drizzle there. So when I didn't twist my toothpick, I got a little drizzle that came across, and that's what we want to try to avoid. All right, now that I have this in here, I'm going to be just agitating this a little bit to press the organics down into the resin and making sure that it's fully submerged. And I'm also just double checking to see if I have any bubbles that are underneath the surface, and I'm agitating the organics to make sure that I don't have any bubbles that are trapped. You can also move this organic down into the, if you want it to be that base area right to the edge. You can also add multiple layers of the organics if you wanted to add more, but remember that we only have so much space. There's not very much depth in this, so if you build up multiple layers, it'll be more challenging to pour a second coat on here if you have any organics that are protruding out. Then to get artsy, you can go in and you can swirl this resin around in interesting ways to bring it into your design. You could blend the white, a very pale white, all over it and add more organics. So it's just really up to your own imagination of how you would like this to be. One of the things that I'm going to do at the very end here is I'm going to drizzle a little bit more of the clear on here, and then I'm going to drizzle, pull it out to the side edges, mostly this. So I have a little bit of resin down here that went to the edge, so I'm going to make it consistent and pull all of it out to the edge. Some of it will be white, some of it will be clear, and that's going to be, it'll look nice. Alright, now you can see I pulled it all out to the side edges to kind of have it be nice and consistent in the way in which it is on that open hoop. And you can go ahead and add more colorant in if you want to. You can see on this one, you know, I kind of made it look more mysterious by having a lot more of the white on the piece. As this is setting up, you're going to want to babysit it, and how I do that is I will keep an eye on it for, you know, this first hour as it's curing. If I have any air bubbles start to rise to the surface, I'll use my hot breath to breathe on it. I'm going to take it off the camera. Do like a little huff. But I like how this swirl is up here. I like how this is kind of blending in here. And I'm going to just keep an eye on it, and I might need to pull over a little bit more on the sides if I want to wrap that up all nice and neat. It has been a good 24 hours since I've poured these, and we're ready to take a look at how the organics behaved as we were babysitting them. But before we look at these, let's go back to the examples of the class. Even in these pieces that I created, and I have a single pour on here, you can see that there is a slight, in that example, there is a little protrusion that is coming out right there. Excuse me, I sneezed. I also have a little protrusion that's coming out right there. And these are, you know, I'm just pointing out that that even like this one, there wasn't any, but these organics were completely flat. But I have a single pour on this. This also didn't have any protrusions out the top. So, you know, it's mostly when I'm building up multiple layers that you're going to need to have a 2-pour, or except that you're going to potentially have protrusions. These two didn't have any. So these were all done at the same time in the same pour, just for you to get an idea. So on the samples that we just did, on this one I had, you know, I built up multiple layers, and you can see that there is a slight, you can see that there's a couple of little bumps of the protrusions of the organics coming up to the surface. I mean, if that, you know, it just depends on what you like. If you don't like that, you can do two things. You can put another coat of clear resin over the top and cover that up, or you could use a little bit of steel wool and just lightly sand it to get it nice, and so that you can't see that noticeable difference. And then you can hit it with a resin spray, a resin spray that we used on the organics to give it a nice glossy finish again, or you can just accept it the way that it is. Those are the various options of how you can work with the organics once they're cured. Once the organics are cured, you're going to remove the tape off of the back of the piece. To do that, just start to pull back on the tape, and this cured resin, if you're having any kind of bowing or if it feels tacky, don't be doing this. You have to wait until it's fully cured in order for you to remove the tape off of the back side of the piece. So once the tape is off, you can see that there's still a little bit, it's still slightly tacky. You can do two things. You can take your tape, kind of bend it over, and remove some of the stickiness this way. I have found that this isn't really an effective way, but I still give it as an option, so you don't have to get glue on. But you know, ideally, to get that tape off, what you're going to want to use is this product called Glue Gun. I mean, I know that there's probably a lot of others, but this is a really nice, it has a citrus smell. It works great on the pieces. You put just a few drops of it onto the back side and let it sit, and the tape residue will remove from the surface. Go ahead and do our second piece, and we'll remove the gooeys off the back at the same time. So remove the tape. Ready to put the glue on onto the back side. So I just put a, whoa! Okay, that didn't work. Okay, so not all of the tops of the glue gun are the same. This is a new bottle. This is my old bottle I had forever, and thought it would be great to replace it, but see, it had this on it, so I was not prepared for that flow to come out. So, starting over. To remove the stickies off the back, we're going to use a little bit of Glue Gun. You can keep it on the cards, or you can also put it onto a surface, like a plastic surface. I have just a Ziploc bag just to protect my work surface. And we'll just go ahead and take them off with the cards. We don't need these. So open up your Glue Gun and drip a couple of drops onto the back of the surface of the open hoop. Let that sit there for about 3 minutes. It says on the back of the instructions the time that it works best. About 3 minutes to let that set. After it has set for a couple of minutes, you're going to use a stir stick and just go right into the piece. zoom in here so you can see how easy this is to remove. That gooey stuff on the back didn't look like it was much, but you can see that it just comes off super easy off the back side. Now, I've tried different types of tape, and you can take a look at a blog post that we have on different types of tape that you can use on the back side. There is a painter's tape that's, you know, that blue tape that you see often on a painting project in the house or something like that. That is really nice. It doesn't leave any of this residue, but it does leave a totally different surface on the back. It's more of a texture that gets picked up from that tape, but it definitely avoids this step. So you might be interested in reading that. So once you have cleaned this off, you can see all of that just comes off very easily. You'll want to use a wet wipe to wipe away any of that. Just wipes clean. And then if you have any more residue or anything like that, you should not, but you can use just some rubbing alcohol to clean away the rest. After you've cleaned with the glue begun, just go ahead and clean off your stir stick so it's nice and clean for the next time. You can, you know, just let that dry. Use the other end if you're going to mix resin, but this could be your designated glue stick. You can write glue stick on it, and then you can just reuse this over and over again. So I mentioned about using a steel wool on the surface of this to help eliminate or make it not so obvious those protrusions that are coming out of the resin. I talked about using this and then covering it or spraying it again, or spraying it with the resin spray to give it a nice glossy surface again. So let me just show you how that works and what the results are going to be. I have a piece of plastic on my work surface. I have gloves on after I baby powdered my hands. I typically like to do this step over a trash bag, just so that the little bits of steel wool just go right into the trash bag, and I have less of these fibers on my work area or anywhere near my work area. But I put a piece of plastic down just so I can show you how to do this. So you can see right away, just from a little bit of rubbing, I'm just going in one direction, how it makes the resin be matte and not as glossy, and so that those protrusions aren't nearly as noticeable. Just back and forth in one direction, and see how that has changed that whole look. So I like that look, but we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and do the other one too, and one I'm going to spray with the resin spray and one I'm not, so we can see what the end results look like. Alright, so I have one that I have gone ahead and sanded both of them. You can see you cannot see the protrusions coming out, but I'm going to go ahead head outside and spray one of them with the resin spray and leave the other one the same as it is here so we can see the difference. Just wanted to wipe them down before I sprayed them. Alright, I took this outside and sprayed it with the resin spray. I'm not impressed. So I would not recommend that you use the resin spray to get a nice high gloss look. It's not going to happen. What you would do if you really want it to have the same high gloss look as this is you would need to put another coat of resin over the top of it. That could be challenging because look at, I have already a nice dome on there, and it could be easy for there to be overflow. I didn't have any overflow, I'm sorry to say, on either of these pieces, but let me walk you through how you would navigate that if you did. So remember, this is going to be on a piece of tape, so we would pull off the tape, and I use a pair of like flush cutters or a pair of needle nose pliers when I have the overflow, and I can go in along the sides of this, and you just grab that overflow and bend back, and it'll start to peel away, and you can clean it up off of the side edges. You can also take your flush cutters and go along this edge and trim it away. So those are some of the ways in which you can deal with the overflow if you have had any. So the final step of preparing these to be made into an actual finished piece is going to be gluing on the bail, like it is going to go onto the back side of this piece. So let me show you how to do that. For this step, you'll want to have some sort of surface that you can put your glue on. I have a couple of Q-tips or toothpicks, and I'm using the E6000 glue. Go ahead and open up your container. And when it's brand new, you'll need to poke a little hole in the top part of this. And you can use one of your toothpicks to create a slight hole in there. Squeeze a little bit out onto your work surface, just a small amount. Put the lid back on right away. I have a couple of bales that I've already cleaned, and I'm going to place a little bit of the E6000 onto the back side of the bale, just right in that center area. Not having a lot on there so that I don't have a lot that oozes out on the back side. If you do have a lot, you can take another toothpick and just kind of wipe away that excess. Then, knowing right where I want this design to have its top part, I'm going to guesstimate right there. You can either put a little dot on the back, or I'm just visually placing it into position. So now I know that that is where I definitely want my piece. I'm going to turn this over, and then I'm going to place it onto my work surface and let that fully set up. Let's go ahead and do the second one. So I'm going to want my piece to have the bail right up on the top here. The glue sets up super fast, so I'm going to use another little squirt. Just a tiny bit so I don't have a lot of waste. Using the other end of the toothpick, applying the fresh glue onto the back side of the bail. So placing it on, and I'm going to turn this over. I'm pressing down. Now I don't have too much, I have some glue right there, but I can go in and clean that up after we're done with letting this set up. These pieces that I finished have set up for a couple of weeks. You'll want to do a stress test to make sure that that this is put on well. And if it is not, it'll pop off. Go back in and put more generous glue down onto the piece, and then re-glue it into position. So these are already stress test all of these. So you just want to make sure that you have a nice solid bail attached onto there prior to making it into a finished jewelry piece.